Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this special live session. I'm Itzik Amiel, and we are here with a weekly Switch interview series, Switch It On. We talk to smart and talented people about how you can switch your practice and even your life. So if you listen to us, we are live, and we would love you to join us right now. So yes, join us right now. We are live, and I know you're coming from all over the world, but make sure that you put in the chat to let us know who you are, where you're dialing from, because I want my guests to know that we are here for the big community to listen and to a great message. Today we're going to talk to you about, yes, I know you were curious. We called it Nobody Believes You, and I know I got some messages, people asking what is it about. Don't worry, I promise you will discover more about this episode if you stay with us. But in other words, we're going to talk about how to be a leader people will follow. I really look forward to this insightful episode personally. But again, if you have any question to our speaker during our session, please make sure to put it also in the chat under the video, and I would love to address if it's not here live, definitely after the show is over, when even if you watch the replay. So I have the honor to have this live session with a top internal communication expert. Today, my special guest is my friend Jenni Field. And before I bring her in, I love to talk with people behind people back to share their resume without insulting or embarrassing nobody. So this time is again. So who is Jenni? Jenni Field is an international speaker, author, podcaster, and a business communication strategist. She specializes in helping teams and leaders use communication to take people and organization from chaos to calm. And she's the founder and CEO of Redefining Communication. But before that, she worked as a communication director for a global pharmaceutical business. And prior to that, she was a global head of communication for FTSE 250 hospitality business. Again, coming from the trenches, knowing what she's talking about. But Jenni has her own podcast, Redefining Communication. And I would love you to go and listen to it, watch it if there are videos there as well. And then I'm sure you'll enjoy more than enjoying my session. But don't worry about it. I mean, because she's certified company director for the Institute of Directors and accredited facilitator. She's also a chartered PR practitioner and qualified as in internal communication, when she, of course, spent most of her career life. Recently, and even before, because I know Jenni wrote more than one book, but recently she published a new book, and that's called Nobody Believes You. Become a leader people will follow. Actually, the subject of today's insightful episode. So with that, I'll leave you because I would love to bring Jenni again in. So here, Jenni, let's see where she is. Jenni, are you here?
Hello, I'm
Hey,
here.
thanks for
Hello.
joining me. Again, I
Thank
must
you
admit
so
that
much.
I made a few mistakes, and I already did it, and it sounds like we never met before. We're pretending we met before, and it's the second time, but it's horrible when you have to do more than once, right, Jenni? But
Oh,
we are
always happens.
professional.
It happens.
So thanks for joining Jenni, and it's great to have you here, and thanks for your time, valuable time. But before we start our conversation, with your permission, let me set the stage for our audience. So, for those of you who are thinking about starting their own firm or aiming to really to establish a thriving law practice or accounting practice quickly, in my opinion, our profession presents a unique set of challenges and opportunities. See, whether you're a recent graduate eager to launch your career, or you're really experienced professional lawyer, accountant, looking to make a significant leap, I hope you agree that building a successful practice requires more than just your own professional acumen. It demands a strategic approach, a strong networking skills, a commitment to providing excellent client service, among others. But can you do it right? What are the right practical steps to help you build a widely successful practice rapidly while keeping your authenticity? I want you to learn more by sharing some of the greatest lessons my special guest really learned through her building her business and all leadership skills that you need. And this is exactly the reason for this special session with Jenni. So to dive directly into the subject matter and to start, a big question I think in everybody's minds, Danny, is you talk about in your book and many things, if you read your articles and things you published, about credibility is more important than of being authentic. And I think about a lot of authenticity, and reading that I said, oh, what does she mean? Can you explain why?
I absolutely can. And you said authentic just then, and I was like, oh, we're going to have a good discussion about this. So there's been a lot of talk over the years about leaders being more authentic. Certainly during the pandemic, there was a lot of requests for leaders or demands for them to be more empathetic, be more human, be more vulnerable. All of these things come out a lot. And authenticity has become sort of how we wrap those things up. But the challenge I propose around that is that really, when it comes to being in a leadership position, you are in a position of power. So if you're running your own organization, leading a team, you do have power in that relationship. And being truly authentic in that position sometimes isn't the right thing that we want leaders to be. Because if we think about some of the leaders that we might know, then we might know some business leaders or some politicians who are very authentic, but are they credible as a leader that we would want to follow? And the other challenge with authenticity is that it can be so easily weaponized. I've worked with leaders who have sworn at me in a rage, which was always fun, and told me to get out of their office in a horrible way. And then they apologized a few weeks later, and they said to me, I forget the power of my words in the position that I'm in here sometimes. But they could easily have said, I was just being my authentic self. And that's where it's challenging, because it's so easy to behave badly and then just blame that on being authentic. Whereas what we want is for leaders to be credible so that we'll follow them. And that includes being genuine. And genuine is different to being authentic. You can't weaponize that. You can't use it in that sort of way. So I focus on being genuine more than authentic. But ultimately, I want you to be credible in the leadership role that you have so that I follow you.
Love it. And I think you're right. I mean, first I was shocked that he said a few weeks later the person apologized, which is how long does it take to understand how wrong you
I think I was being kind. I think it was actually a few months. But
are?
we'll leave that. We'll leave that to the side.
So if you're listening to us right now, we make sure that you call right now to Jenni and said, you were stupid to wait a few months. Why? But I mean, that's why you're successful, Jenni, in talking about the subject. But I agree that indeed many people talk about authenticity, and I think the word authenticity misused so many times, but unauthentic people. So I mean, indeed, don't mix them with being genuine and authentic. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, it sounds the same, but it absolutely doesn't mean the same. Again, if you're listening to us, right, we're live, and we would love you to join us, learn about how to become a leader people will follow. And again, if you have questions to our guest, Jenni Field, today, make sure you type it in the chat. So let's dive in even more, Jenni, because it's a really interesting point you raised. It seems like so many professionals focusing on being authentic, I promise you. And if you're saying there is a better approach. Okay, so it's not about being someone you are not, right? Being authentic is not, but about being someone other can trust and believe in. So let's move into what creates that perception. And I'm very curious to your answer for the following question is, what does a leader really need to be, as you said, credible?
So it's the biggest thing is that it's more complicated than just a really nice, short, snappy sentence, which is what everybody likes. Like, people want to say, oh, well, being credible is about being believed when you're not in the room, or it's being accountable. We want something short and snappy. But leadership is complicated because you're having to do so many different things. So trying to make it something really short and snappy just doesn't work. And the 8 practices of credible leadership that I outline in the book come from about 4 years of reading and research into why we follow some leaders and not others. And the words that are the kind of the core 8 practices have come sometimes from the language of followers saying this is what's important. So there are 8 practices, and then there are 3 sort of traits or behaviors that sit underneath each of those. Excuse me. So the 8 are, and I'm going to try and remember them without having to think of them in alphabetical order. So you need to be capable. You need to be trustworthy. You need to be empathetic. You need to have a visionary practice. That's not that's not about having a vision. It's about being able to articulate where you're going. So visionary. So where should I get to? Capable, empathetic, trustworthy, visionary, vulnerable, integrity. I know I was going to forget some, and I shouldn't, because they should all be on the absolute tip of my tongue, shouldn't they? Where did I get to? Let me go back again. We had capable. Let me start from the beginning. It's much easier. I'm trying to remember and do it
She
not
did it in purpose, by the way,
alphabetically.
to show you that it's not so easy, you
let me
know.
let me do it alphabetically, because that'll be easier. Right? You have to be capable. You have to
Yeah.
be empathetic. You have to have integrity. You have to be likable. You have to be supportive. You have to be trustworthy. You have to have the visionary, and you have to be vulnerable. There we go. Alphabetical is much easier. I don't know why I didn't just stick with that in the first place.
Called List VV. That's the actual acronym.
There we go.
Great. So thanks for sharing. I mean, I'm sure that we're gonna go dive in even more to those. I mean, and what tricked me actually what you said is, that many people think leadership is something snappy and short, but it's exactly the same thing I'm saying. That people going to a weekend do a leadership training. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah.
But by one weekend you can be a leader. I mean, it takes time, of course. There's so
Oh,
many more things
yeah.
to learn, and each one of those 8 that Jenny shared with us, we're gonna dive in more in a short. Actually, you need to dive and learn each one of them, and that takes time. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no magic formula over here except for doing it. But
Yeah.
that's very insightful, Jenny. Again, for those of you who want to ask questions, Jenny, now's the time to ask it. Type it in right now in the chat box, because I would love Jenny to answer your question as well. And again, you're invited, if you're just joining us, to learn about how to become a leader. People will follow. I promise you, even you're a leader within your group, within your team, there's a valuable lesson to hear from this conversation. So I love your overview again, Jenny, and it leads me to the next question. It's fascinating to consider how all those traits really work together. It sounds like
Mhm.
a good way to show the complexity of the question. That's why I said you do it in purpose, because there is a complex there. Now, to continue again this insightful conversation, not to disturb you too much, let's bring down to a very practical question that our listener can use today. And so I really want to know from you if there's any one from all the 8 you mentioned that is more important than the others, or you say people should start with that one.
So the answer is always it depends, isn't it? So the subject of credibility is very
Are you a
subjective.
lawyer, Jenny?
I've just worked with too many. So this because it's so subjective. There are things to consider. So I will give you the one practice that I kind of come back to as being your starting point. But what I
Mhm.
will say is that it does depend on the culture, both in terms of the culture of your organization and the culture of geographically where you are, because some of these things will be more important in different cultures. It depends on what's going on for you. So if you're an organization that's going through significant growth, you might be merging, you might be selling, you might be just starting. There will be different things that will be needed during those times. So I always think of them as sort of different levers you might need to pull depending on what's happening. So that's my caveat. And then the one that I would come back to as being not necessarily the most important, but where I would start would be visionary. And the reason I would start there is because having the visionary practice means that you can articulate where you're going. So within visionary, we talk about being inspiring, we talk about having good communication skills, and we talk about being very passionate. And if you are lacking that practice, what you will get is apathy. So you will just get people not doing anything. So if you want people to move and do things and help you grow or achieve that big objective, then you have to be able to articulate where you're going, because when it's missing, the impact of that is huge. But this isn't just about being able to sort of stand up and tell a good story. It has to be backed up by the other practices. But if you're going to start anywhere, then I would start here. And there's some really practical stuff that you can do to help build your communication skills. Like there's 6 things I talk about in the book, both my first and my second book. And your passion should be there, right? Most of the people probably watching and listening to this are very passionate about what they do because it's maybe their organization, they're leading a significant team. That's a big part of that. And you have to have that responsibility to inspire others to do things. So it's how you tell stories and how you make that connection. So visionary is always where I say we should start. Just the easiest one to start with.
Although it was in your acronym was in the last one, the last 2 V's, but interesting. But I think you're right. It's interesting because it also connected me to another subject, all thought leadership. Which is, again, there's a leadership in it. Many people call themselves thought leader, but they have nobody to lead because they have no this community. They're not visionary. So I mean, if the right article nobody watch it or listen to it or whatever, then you
Yeah.
cannot lead yourself in emptiness and call yourself a leader. You have to have followers to
Yes.
become a leader, and to be a follower, as you need to have vision, people
Yes.
follow. So absolutely connected, and makes it actually a lot of things that in the subconscious. I mean, make it more sharp listening to you. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, for the practicalities, and to really answers that you always answer to the point. Makes my life miserable. Question. I mean, again, if you have questions for Jenni, make sure you're putting it right now in the chat book, because I'm here with Jenni Field speaking on how to become a leader people will follow. And again, I want to say hello to those of you joining. But again, if you don't say who you are, we will not know who you are. So if you're interested, by the way, if learning more about Jenni and her work, you can connect with her first on LinkedIn, or even check a website, which is redefiningcoms.com. I'm going to put it also under the video. You will be able to link it directly. And is anything else you can link the direct to people, Jenni, that you would love to?
I think that's probably fine. You can find the books on there, the podcast.
Exactly. I'm
I've
going to
got,
say that.
all those. Yeah, it's all there.
Buy,
So
get a copy
yeah,
of her new book, definitely, for sure. If you want to make sure, again, that you learn all these things thoroughly and a little more details. And the website, again, redefiningcoms.com. You could find all the information and buy the book. And again, if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly Switch on interview series, as we asking all the time, follow me on LinkedIn, go to the Switch Hub website. You can sign up and get my business development strategies and tips. You'll be added to our email list, and you'll get a regular reminder about fantastic guests like Jenni today. So make sure you do that. So let's continue about this insightful topic of how to become a leader people will follow. Because again, without people following you, I guess you're not a leader.
true.
So I want to share with again the really interesting point that you have mentioned, Jenni, is not to focus on one over all the other. That it's the combination of the 8 practices again that you mentioned,
Mhm.
and don't ask me to repeat them, but credibility that makes for good leadership. And okay, it's a great takeaway to start with a better understanding of the people around you, be visionary, character. But the next question is, I think, more bothering me is that many of I think our listeners for sure will be happy to know your answer to it. If a leader really struggling with the team at the moment, really struggling, they are leaders, they need supposed to lead the team, but they're struggling with the team. What the first thing you will tell them to do as an expert?
Oh, I'm going to say it depends to everything, aren't I? So I would always want to go into what are you seeing, like what's happening for you that is telling you people are struggling, like that connection struggling. What's happening? Are people going off sick? Are they not turning up for work? Are they not doing the work? What's going on? Because we have to get underneath that symptom and get into sort of the root cause of that in order to fix the right thing. Otherwise, you could end up spending a lot of time pulling one lever when actually it's something else. So it's always worth having some conversations to find out why things are happening. So always start there. But I think if you're struggling with people maybe not doing what you need them to do, which is often quite common, then the visionary one is the important one. You need to be clear about where you want them to go, and you need to be able to communicate that. If you are struggling with people and you feel like they're just not connecting with you or with what you're trying to achieve, then that's vulnerability. So we look at vulnerability with the goal of being able to create connection. If you're not being vulnerable, you'll get disconnection. And vulnerability is sometimes one of those things that people talk about a lot. And then we think we have to stand up and tell a really vulnerable story, or we have to cry or something, and we don't really know what that means. So when we're talking about being vulnerable, we're talking about being a bit more human and certainly courageous. That goes hand in hand, and very open. But being vulnerable is about that balance of being personal but not intimate. And that's what you're trying to discover. And you're trying to connect with your audience. So you might be talking about things that they can't relate to. So it's important to find the things that are relatable and tell those stories to build that connection. If you're finding that people just don't like you very much, and we've all been there as a leader, and that's okay, but if it's causing disruptive behavior and it's having that impact, that would be that you're not showing enough empathy. And so you need to dial up some of that empathy side. So you need to show a bit more care and compassion. And for a leader today in a post-COVID world, flexibility becomes part of empathy. So empathy is about believing someone else's experience, regardless of what yours is. And flexibility in the workplace is such a big part of that now. There might be people that work for you who have childcare. There might be carers. There could be any number of reasons why they need a bit more flexible working. And that shows that caring and compassionate side, not to the detriment of organizational success, but you can bring that forward in some of your communication styles and making time for people. And I think that's certainly something I'm hearing a lot more recently, I say over the last 6 months, that people are just really trying to get more productive, really achieve their goals, and we're trying to run. And what that means is that we're not making time for the relationships at work. And when we're leading people and leading an organization, your organization doesn't exist without the people. It could have a brand, it could have this, but organizations are people. So we have to make time for that in order to achieve what we want to achieve. So it does depend on what you're seeing, but those are the, being visionary, the vulnerability, the empathy are things to dial up. If you've got really low engagement scores, if you measure that and you're seeing that people aren't very engaged and they're just, again, not really doing what you need them to do, that means you have an issue with trust, which feels really uncomfortable. But there is a trust issue there, because if you're not trustworthy, you get disengagement. So we can start to see how, what are the things that are driving some of those things, and then how to fix them. If trust is the issue, it's got to be face-to-face communication and spending more time with the team. I could just keep talking for hours there about what.
No, I'm listening. You know what happening when I'm listening to you? I'm seeing stories of from my past, company I work, and I can see the reflection of the people you're talking about almost.
Yeah.
We all know those people, right? But
yes.
That's how we realizing what happened. But I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I didn't play. But asking, what about the opposite? What if I'm a team member and I want to correct the leader that you're talking to right now? Should I do that? I shouldn't do it. I should not dare. Let's say I read your book and I see this 8 and say, hey, my leader is missing this part. Because I used to tell people, and I'll be honest with you, my advice to people was, example, legal marketing and law firm. I said to the ladies, most of them is lady, by the way, because they're more talented in that regard than men. But I tell them, if you don't dare to knock on the door of the CEO of the firm and say, you need to listen to me right now, with the fear they're going to fire you, you will never be successful. Because if you really want to correct somebody, and meant from a good place, right, that you want to have a great team and a great team leader that you could really support and serve and help, should people dare to do that? Or no, you're talking only to the leaders. They should listen. If the leader is not listening, let the whole team suffer.
Yeah. It's tricky. Some people have said to me, can I give your book to my leader? And I've said, if you're brave enough to give them a book called Nobody Believes You, then absolutely go for it. So there's some context around that's important. I'm with you. I'm quite a believer in people should be aware of the impacts of their behavior and communication. I often say to people, if they don't know that isn't working for you, they can't fix it. And I stand by that. We have to know what needs to be changed. That said, unsolicited feedback is not going to go down well ever. And if you come at anybody with, I just want to give you some feedback that they haven't really asked for, they're going to be defensive about that, and they're not going to want to have that. So it's, for me, some of it is about putting parameters in place for proper sort of performance management conversations. So if you're having one-to-ones with your team, open the door to have the conversation of, what would you like me to stop? What would you like me to start? What should I continue? Like, be open to that feedback. If you can open that door, then you're allowing that. It's unlikely that in a hierarchical situation, someone's going to come in and say, look, you have a problem. But I would encourage people to look at how you could package that in a way that talks about the impacts. There's a nice framework about feedback that I read in the book, Inclusion on Purpose. And it was really good about the situation, the impact, and then the behavior. I think if you can frame it in that way and you can make sure that it's very clear, then it's really important. And it's particularly important when you're talking to anybody, but certainly if you're talking to anyone that you might say is like underrepresented or in the minority in that organization, because to just give somebody feedback without that context becomes, can again be a very uncomfortable and unpleasant situation. So yes, I'm all for people giving my book to their leaders, by the way, because the more leaders that would read it, the more the workplace would be a better place. So I'm happy for you to give them away.
I even better suggestion, go give it to the people you already work in the past and never dare to tell them, because I think they're probably, that's what my solution was when I leave organization. Years after, I found this person I really hated in that moment, and I tell him the criticism in his face. First, be honest, you're very selfish behavior to get the relief that I hold in my stomach for years. But every single time I did it, and it was very sincere, I just developed better relationship with these people because they listen, They knew them, right? Because they heard it before, behind the back, many times before. So I'm
Yeah.
not the only one. And suddenly somebody in this world dared to tell them and
Yeah.
even willing to help them.
Yeah.
Although it
But
doesn't owe them, it is not the employee, they don't need them anymore. And
yeah,
I think
it's
every time, that's what I did. So
yeah. I think it also depends on sort of your credits in that relationship bank, if it were. Like there's certain leaders I've worked with where I know I could have gone in and said, look, we've got
mm,
a bit of a situation here and I think you need to be aware of it. There's others, like the person I think I mentioned who told me to get out of her office, that I would never have gone in and given them unsolicited feedback because it was never going to go down well and it would never have been well received. And I think if you're doing it, like you said, you're doing it with that positive intent. If you're doing it because you want to come from a more coaching perspective than a critic perspective, then absolutely embrace that. You've just got to consider how you go about that.
and just to complete that, also for that I have a solution. I had a boss like that. So there are two ways. One, wait till they die and do it in the funeral. I mean, sorry for that, but maybe not the best solution. But my solution was I promised my boss I'll be on the biggest stage of the world, and I promised him to be an idiot, and that's what I'm doing. So I mean, so,
I love
if
that.
you listen
True
to
to
me
your
right now,
word.
thank you for being an idiot. Because of you, I'm successful. So there you go. So that's the best solution I found. So thanks for those practical ideas. Love your energies there, Jenny. Love, probably heard it before, but I love that you're really so practical and aiming to help people and not just throw knowledge at them, And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people take a lot of value what you're telling them. So thank you very, very much for that. I mean, again, I'm waiting for you guys to ask your question because that's your time. Because we almost an hour of our conversation. But because today we dive really deeper than you probably normally do in a truth that many of us professionals miss. Leadership isn't a title. You see, it's a responsibility that shapes life, if you allow me to say that, Jenny. But
Yeah.
when we step into leadership within your professional firm or organization, you're not just changing your role, you're changing lives. And that's exactly what Jenny telling us. Every decision, every word, every action ripples through your firm, for your practice, or your organization, and touches real people with real dreams, with real challenges. And you can really make a difference if you just listen to the right way of becoming the leader people want to follow. So here's your challenge. As we're really concluding today's episode, ask yourself, am I leading with impact or I'm just managing with authority? you know as you learned today with session with Jenny, I would recommend very, very much to read the book because there's so much more information we could not cover. Sorry for the 30 minutes we had together. And I would love if you can connect with Jenny directly and answer this question, because I want you to remember leadership is responsibility. It's one that needs to be approached with intention and focus on credibility. And that's exactly the lesson, the bigger lesson I learned today from Jenny. To summarize this great session, let me share a quote that definitely can inspire many of you. A quote by Simon Sinek, who said, "The responsibility of leadership is not taken, it is given. Only when others choose to follow us, we can truly lead." And I think, as we heard before, you cannot lead yourself, maybe to the shower or to bed, but nowhere else. So thank you very much for that, Jenny. Thanks very much for all the thing. Now it's your friends, your time to take action and implement everything you learn in this session. If you have again any question, Jenny, go approach her. We have been here with Jenni Field. She is a top accomplished internal communication expert, speaker, author, and I want to add a wonderful source that you all see of the positive energies of the world. So happy that people like that exist in our world. So thank you for that, Jenny. Thank you very much for being with us. Fantastic having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. And Jenny, myself, I want to thank each one of you. Join, stay with us till the end. Thank you very much for that. Feel comfortable to reach to Jenny again. And remember, next episode is next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central European Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. But now it's your time to switch on and start your journey to become a leader that people will follow. Thanks for that. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Bye for now.